Is it possible to be killed by something as simple as running your electric fan at night? Most notably in South Korea, it's a fear that's cemented itself into society for decades, so much so that it's changed the way many go about their daily life. Today, we're looking into the phenomenon known as fan death. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and today we're leaning into the unknown. I'm your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me hearing about this phenomenon, this urban legend, this folklore for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
I saw the title was Fan Death, and I was like, wait a second, does it have to do with, I don't know, someone in the task force or someone like, that would be gnarly.
Yeah.
There's something of the sort. Not a literal fan, so that's interesting. So I'm very intrigued as to what this is, because I have fans turned on all the time. So what's happening here?
Guys, comment Braveheart. This man's Braveheart out here with his fans on.
Yeah, is it crashing? Is it throwing particles into your face? Like, I don't know what's going on here. Although I might be safe because I had this little side tangent. I had this industrial air purifier.
Industrial?
Yeah, it was when I had my house, so it sucked in like up to I think like 5,000 square feet or something like that.
Oh, okay. So your apartment's getting like new air every 3 minutes.
It's so fresh in here. Here's the thing. It said change the filter.
Okay.
I bought a filter, ended up being 2 filters. I was like, well, I won't need the other one for like years. Anyways, went to go change it, and I've had this thing for 4 years.
Don't tell me plastic still on the filter, guy.
Yeah.
My guy, no. I'll tell you, ain't nothing getting through that plastic film, though.
Bro, that thing purifies like no other now. Let me tell you. Holy. But also, like, it was doing a little bit of its job. Like, dog smell would disappear when I turn it on.
Right, nothing gets through the plastic.
Yeah, the plastic was covered in dust and everything. So I have 3 filters now, so I'll be good for the next decade.
That's terrible. I've seen that. And I've cracked mine. I used to have one. I don't have one anymore. I crack it open just to make sure as soon as I see those like TikToks and Reels come through, I go, oh, yeah. Good pro tip. Here's the thing, though. What I used to do was I would just vacuum it back off. You know, I just vacuum the filter back off, pull all the dust back out, and I go, new filter.
New filter, baby.
Right.
Second life.
Second
life. I have
life,
a smaller one,
times.
and I've unpackaged that. I just didn't think about the larger one. I just plugged it in and turned it on.
Right, because it comes with one. And so you'd think if it's already installed, it'd be installed properly, but it's also hanging out in an industrial warehouse. Yeah. And yeah, that's wild.
4 years, baby. That thing running.
4 years, and you didn't think to change the filter in that time?
Well, it didn't. It tells you when it needs to be changed.
It's because it was new the whole time.
Exactly.
That's wild. Well, Task Force, as you can see, we're coming into the holiday window of Red Web and kind of coming off the back of the heist of last week, the Great Brinks heist, which was crazy. That case was awesome, but it was also one of the biggest heists at the time when it went down in the 50s here in the United States. But kind of as like a refresher, and as we enter the holiday season, we have, as we do almost every year, a little bit of the more out there, the more interesting, the more folklore-based kind of topics. And this one is an interesting and light one, dare I say, an airy one, pun, to kind of kick off the season. And so, yes, we're talking about the fan death idea. It is very prominent in South Korea, though it has made its way into the discussions in Japan. I've seen Vietnam on Reddit before as well, but it is a very interesting one. So we're going to break down what this idea is. We're going to kind of analyze it, and there really isn't a theory per se. We'll kind of have that discussion as we go along, but there is kind of a loose explanation, and we're almost seeing, by the time we finish this discussion, you'll see that this is almost maybe the end of life of folklore. Fredo, there's been a few times where we've talked about almost the origin of a ghost story, the origin of an urban legend. And this is one of those rare moments where we might be seeing the closure of one, how kind of life ebbs and flows in society and cultures and generations as they move on. Things come and go from the zeitgeist. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about everything to do with this one, top to bottom.
Like I said, it's the holiday season. We get into the lighter stuff. This is a time where we have a little bit more fun or go for the little bit more bizarre stories.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, fan death is definitely up there. So intriguing.
Mm-hmm. Now, when I first mentioned fan death, I thought you would definitely get a misinterpretation, mostly as a concert goer. I thought you'd maybe think of that. What was that M. Night movie or his daughter's movie where the concert gets locked down and there's a murderer in there?
That's right.
I think fan death, you
With,
think of
Josh Hartnett? What is it?
something like that. Something like that.
Yes, it was Josh Hartnett. The movie's Trap.
Trap.
It's
There
Trap.
you go.
Thank you.
Christian.
Guy in the chair.
Yeah, that movie was not great.
Terrible to hear that. I was very excited about it, so I haven't seen it now. But speaking of things going on in Red Web, we've done some very recent movie clubs that are all phenomenal. Those are over at redwebpod.com. But speaking about this week in particular, we have a few things as we enter. I think we're recording way ahead. This is Thanksgiving weekend here in America. So happy holidays to anybody taking work off. We expect that you might have some free time, but you'll also be traveling and seeing family. And if you have some time while you're traveling, just know on Wednesday, we are live streaming yet another recording of Break Room. It is our behind the scene podcast where anything can go down. Last time we did a tier list to talk about horror movies because it was in October. This time, who knows? Maybe we'll do a turkey tier list. I don't know what that would look like, but last year we talked about Gobble Squatch, a very real creature.
Doesn't surprise me that, I mean, if a squonk exists, then Gobble Squatch exists. But yeah, if you want to get away from like Aunt Gertrude or anything like that, who's just sucking down drinks and has no filter whatsoever, you can sneak off for an extra long bathroom break.
Right.
Enjoy
We expect
this
everyone in the
live.
chat will be on the toilet at the same time. And hey, while you're in there risking a hemorrhoid or whatever, we've got a fieldwork on Friday. Another gameplay. We do this every month. It is our simulation chamber to see if we can survive a ghost hunt, a monster hunt, or what have you. Christian, by the way, I'm going to put this on air. Now that the ghost hunt is public and people are watching it, there are some comments asking for us to do a cryptid investigation. So maybe with our travel stretch goal, we can go find the Jersey Devil out in the woods of Jersey or something. Or Mothman, I don't know.
If you want to just go stomping around the woods in the middle of the night, we certainly can look into it.
It's daylight, so I'm brave. Put it on the docket.
Yeah, that's true. It is daylight.
then when we get
extra down.
Yeah. All right. Lots going on in the Red Web universe. Come support us. You get so many things, exclusives every single week. We talk about them here, but of course you get the podcast ad-free and lots of other extra goodies as they are seasonal. So with that said, let's dive into the idea of fan death, also known as Korean fan death, because that is kind of prominently where this idea really has taken hold. And we'll talk about as many whys as possible, right? There's a lot of non-firm answers here, but we're really going to take that analytical lens and try to dissect this. How did this start? Why did it grab hold so firmly? And why is it still kind of around? Especially when you consider some of the scientific evidence against it, right? It's a fantastic and interesting idea. I love exploring urban legends, so let's do it. Fan death, as the name implies, is the name of a widespread urban legend that sleeping with an electric fan on will lead to death. Again, this is most common in South Korea, but primarily I've seen discussion also in Japan, a little bit in Vietnam, but certainly primarily in South Korea. And this belief that sleeping in an enclosed room with no cracked windows and a fan running will lead to medical issues that will cause death in the night, or could cause death. Despite its popularity, it's unclear where exactly this legend started, but again, we're going to do our best to kind of crack into that. Now, some have cited that the fear began in the late 1920s. This is when electric fans were first introduced to South Korea, and electric fans themselves, of course, have a long history. I believe they were first invented somewhere in the 1880s. There was an American engineer named Schuyler Wheeler who invented these, so they've been around almost as long as electricity has been around. But of course, the mass manufacturing and shipping of them, houses didn't have all the electric goods until they were more consumer grade and financially reasonable to buy. So they made their way to South Korea more popularly about 40 years on in the late 1920s. Now, in 1927, there was an article published in South Korea, and it was titled "Strange Harm from Electric Fans," and it warned that electric fans and the use of these electric fans could pose health problems, and they could lead to exacerbating these health problems. Reportedly, the article states that there was risk of nausea, facial paralysis, and asphyxiation while these fans were in use. The reasoning that they gave for this was that the fans were thought to simply circulate old air, and that the lack of fresh airflow would cause somehow someone to choke on their own carbon dioxide. So not a super scientific approach, but it kind of leans into the idea of like, well, that makes sense to me, and therefore I'm kind of worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like, it's newer technology, so people have these concerns, and they're just like, okay, the air's not flowing in and out, and sure, it's more of a convenience, but like with any new technology, you should always be checking to see it's like, okay, what are the potential downsides? Not just completely accepting of the new thing that comes to the market. So I get it.
Right. But this also does admittedly have a little bit of Always Sunny in Philadelphia vibes, where burning trash makes smoke and smoke goes up in the sky, makes stars. I don't know enough about stars to disprove this kind of attitude. Like, makes sense to me, therefore. But also, this is looking back, right? This is looking back with, I'm surrounded in this room by electronics. If I pulled out the EMF reader right now, it'd be spiked to 5 no matter where I held it in this room.
That's very true. And, it's just one of those things where, I don't know. If you look at that, I mean, it's not that it's terrible to like try to analyze and question things, but if you look at that, then you should be looking at a million other things too as well. Because then I'm sure there's a laundry list of things that are probably bad for us.
Oh, for sure. Cell phone in the pocket, we're gonna find out something.
Yeah, cell phone in the pocket, everything's in plastic. And so like, it's issues. Everything's got their issues.
Yeah, asbestos and lead weren't really figured out until like way after it was everywhere. And then we went, oh gosh. So I get it. I don't want to be a huge proponent of being a Luddite and the attacking of progress and electricity, but I can totally understand. In the 1920s, you have people who are adults who have been around for quite some time who definitely grew up without it. And so, as with every new technology, as you're saying, it kind of comes with, well, I didn't have that when I grew up, so I'm a little skeptical. You and I will have that as we go on. I mean, we're already having it now, I'm sure, but...
Yeah, we're having it now with AI, and I know AI causes a lot of issues, but something in me just says, like, once it starts reaching a very convenient household item, you know what I mean? Or just becomes very convenient for the everyday household, that's what people are gonna flip on it. And like that's gonna be the interesting thing, because there's so many people that are like, no. I'm like, you're probably gonna fold once it starts hitting your everyday like convenience type of like household.
It really depends on the iteration. Right now, AI is slapped on everything.
Right.
And there's everything from generative, which is like, we built this based on all this stolen copyright information, and we're selling it back to you without using humans. And then there's AI, which is more, I analyzed the data trend and I figured out that this might be an interesting thing for you to buy because your groceries trend this. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's 1,000 million different micro directions for AI to go. And I think I'm kind of just standing back and just watching, because much like the internet, everyone had a website in 1999. 90% of them essentially as companies disappeared. And then now we see what the internet is now.
Yeah,
so
good point.
It'll be very interesting to see how this whole conversation kind of goes. But coming back to now the 1920s, we're talking about obviously the fan death is now taking off. And while it's unclear how prevalent this superstition was between 1927 and 1970s, so like a 50-year run here, this superstition is growing. It's reported that the theory gained more traction towards the end of that time frame. So throughout the 70s, it really seemed to pick up steam. And so when a lot of people look at it and they look at this superstition, especially analytically, they go, well, what really, especially in a more modern era, helped this idea, this fear, spread more quickly? Especially when we have more science and more understanding of everything to maybe analyze it. And so this is where a popular theory has come to the table. And during that time period, globally, but certain also in Korea, was the 1970s energy crisis. And so some theorize that the Korean government began to popularize this myth almost as a convenience, because it was already out there. And so they said, well, let's just instead of inventing something new, let's just lean into this belief, because propaganda, for negative or for better, what have you, it's almost like, let's lean into this fear to scare households into cutting down on the energy consumption.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, what company is coming into play right now that's like, hey, let's roll it back, and they're not that great. And in the same way where You know, a lot of companies, when electric vehicles first started coming out, there's a lot of like oil companies that are just like, the battery could explode, or like, the cost to replace your battery is massive. And although sometimes true, it's like, okay, but let's make progress here,
Right.
and give options, let the technology grow, and
Right.
have consumers test and use for themselves and figure out what works. And I'm sure we could find some type of middle ground. And I'm sure, just in the same way that they weren't happy when hybrids were coming out, right? And they were so fuel efficient. And it's like, yeah. And so instantly my mind went to, okay, hold on. What big corporation
Right.
is trying to like sway people in a different direction here?
Yeah, for sure. And now, ironically, you think of electric fans, you think of ceiling fans. They're a much more economic way to control the temperature, or at least make the temperature in a house feel more comfortable rather than, something like an air conditioner. But of course, during this time, as energy costs are rising sharply and the grids become more strained, there's still logic to cutting out any frivolous electricity usage. So cutting these out would be preferred. We even saw that here in Texas during the big freeze, where they're like, stop everything, turn off everything, because the grid is so fragile that any usage anywhere, we should just stop, right? Now, the 1970s energy crisis, I'm not going to give you a full breakdown of this, but in short, basically what this was there were oil supply issues, a lot of embargoes triggering, which led to spikes in energy costs because the supply dramatically decreased. And so this also landed in South Korea during a time where they were importing a lot of oil to fuel a rapidly industrializing nation, which compounded this issue greatly. It's partly why South Korea invested so much into nuclear energy, so they would never have this issue again. But so that's the backdrop. And going after fans is seemingly like a very random thing. I imagine there was a greater and wider effort to say, hey, let's limit electricity usage. Fans does feel like a frivolous thing to attack in the grand scheme of things. But even nowadays with LED bulbs, people are like, well, turn your lights off. Across all the households, you minimize the strain. So that is a very viable way for this to have re-cemented itself in the zeitgeist, especially if the Korean government is leaning into this. Again, if it's just to decrease strain, whatever, it might add this idea of validity to the fear, especially for anybody who grew up aware of this fear.
This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Uncommon Goods. The countdown is on. Holiday shopping season is officially here. Uncommon Goods takes the stress out of gifting with thousands of unique, high-quality finds you won't see anywhere else. Uncommon Goods looks for products that are high quality, unique, and often handmade or made in the US. Many are crafted by independent artists and small businesses, making every gift feel meaningful and truly one of a kind. So Uncommon Goods has these custom pet embroidered sweatshirts, and I love my corgi. So this is an independent creator, Kendall and Jake Chambers, and you can send them a picture of your dog and you get an embroidered sweatshirt that looks just like them. So it's absolutely amazing. Uncommon Goods has something for everyone, from moms and dads to kids and teens, from book lovers, history buffs, and diehard football fans to foodies, mixologists, and avid gardeners. You'll find thousands of new gift ideas that you won't find anywhere else. And with every purchase you make at Uncommon Goods, they give back $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice. They've donated more than $3.1 million to date. Don't wait. Cross those names off your list before the rush. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/redweb. That's uncommongoods.com/redweb for 15% off. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Aura Frames. What if you can give a gift that brings your favorite holiday traditions and memories to life every day? Well, with an Aura Frame, you can. Every Christmas, we all come in, we prepare a meal, we bring it, we take photos. It's awesome because with Aura Frames, I can keep stacking those photos throughout the years, anytime, anywhere. Aura Frames offers unlimited free photos and video. It's simple. Just download the app and connect to Wi-Fi. You have the ability to preload photos before it ships, so whoever receives their frame has personalized photos ready to view straight out of the box. And you can keep adding from anywhere, anytime. Every frame even comes packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag, making it ready to gift from the moment it arrives. You can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it. For a limited time, visit auraframes.com and get $45 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code REDWEB at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code REDWEB. This exclusive Black Friday Cyber Monday deal is their best of the year, so order now before it ends. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
So since then, of course, it has ingrained itself into Korean society. South Korea's largest fan manufacturer, Shanil Industry Company, I think they're called Shanil Electronics now. In recent years, they changed. But they reportedly put warnings on their fans to keep them pointed away from people at night. Now, I say reportedly because while we do have an image showing a warning of this type, we're not sure if this is specifically from Shanil Company or somebody else. So, again, reportedly, we couldn't find very specifically an image of this warning.
So it says, do not use fans with strong wind in airtight or near them.
It might be a little translation kerfuffle there.
Especially if used during sleep, there is a risk of life.
Yeah. And so reportedly, the Shanil Electronics Company, their version of this states, quote, "This product may cause suffocation or hypothermia." And very soon, Fredo, I'll walk you through all the different medical conditions that are attributed to fan usage. Yeah. But that is very interesting, you know, especially in a very litigious country where hot cups need to say hot on it because an accident could happen and somebody gets burned and they didn't expect it to be hot. So we are very aware of all these warnings. But then from our perspective, Fredo, it does feel like these must have or carry some sort of legal precedent or, you know, scientific validity to them a little bit. And so,
yeah,
you know?
I'm just kind of sitting here just like, like, I'd be like, how does that work? I guess like just circling what CO2 back into your face, or?
I guess that's part of the idea. Yeah. And we'll kind of talk about it when we get to the asphyxiation analysis. We're going to basically analyze all the different possible medical concerns and conditions attributed to fan death. But yeah, that's broadly the idea. Without, you know, creating offense to anybody who subscribes to this, it is quite pseudoscientific in its fear. I can't really find anything that says specifically, because of these reasons, this is what it will do, right? It's more of a broadly like, well, it's kind of like spirits, right? You and I have talked about this a lot. We might not subscribe to the idea of the paranormal or a ghost, but why mess with it?
Exactly.
You know, well, that's been your disposition up until our most recent ghost hunt.
Yes, sir. I'm very excited. As this is recording, I'm very excited to take a look at the comments and see if anyone can explain anything, so I could just believe that.
So far, I don't have any good news for you. So far, it's only getting worse.
Damn it.
So many wild timestamps. Okay. That should be, Task Force, by the time you're listening to this episode. Our reaction to your comments and everything should be up on our Patreon page, redwebpod.com. And then a week after that, it should be then available on YouTube. So go check it out if it's up already. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at. And it is interesting to see these warning labels because, yeah, it does carry a little bit of validity to it. There's some weight to it, I think. So it could be hedging a bet, saying just in case, let's put the warning. Or it could just be because it is a Korean company that it's part of the belief. Now, interestingly, it is so firmly part of South Korean culture that fans are now modernly equipped with timers. So at some point in the night, you can fall asleep with these on, but they will time out and turn themselves off after a certain amount of time. And this is obviously to prevent any sort of injury from usage of these fans. This feature seems to be pretty unique to South Korea, but that's a pretty broad stamp to put out there on a broadly public podcast. So Task Force, if you have fans, like electric fans standalone that you use at home that have a timer and you're not from South Korea, I would be very curious how common that is elsewhere. But I will say, at least in America, I've noticed this feature. Fredo, let me know if you have. The air vents in bathrooms and in kitchens, they don't, like when I grew up, you just had a switch. You could turn it on and turn it off. Now you can't turn it on and off. You have a timer like 5, 10, 15, 30, or 60 minutes before it turns itself off. And the reason for that, I've looked into that, and that's more of a fire hazard based thing because they're in the ceiling. People don't really clean them out very often, so dust gets in there. And so if you leave a vent on for hours, there are a lot of house fires that are caused primarily because of these ceiling fans, or these ceiling vents, I should say.
Oh, we haven't really seen timers. I lived in 2 modern homes not too long ago, and then now a modern apartment. I haven't seen like timers and stuff. So
The vent in your bathroom, is it automatic with the light, or does it have its own dedicated switch?
yeah, it's automatic with the light.
Okay, so then you're inclined to turn it off because you leave, you turn the light off.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, because like our home is like, it's not super modern, but it's also not super old. It's, I don't know, middle-aged for a house, I guess, but
Yeah.
it has like the buttons now, which sometimes I'm like, come on, wife's going in the potty room after me. I gotta leave that thing off for a couple hours. You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
It's like, come on, man. You know, we live together, but yeah, we vent it out.
I gotta save her a little bit. Fumigate the bathroom. But yeah, so anyway, that's the main thing I can think of as far as fans with timers. But again, it's not like a desk fan or a spinning fan like that. You know, a ceiling fan with blades, those things are normal switches, yeah.
Right.
On and
yeah.
off. All right, well, with that, let's discuss a more detailed analysis, I think, of the common conditions that are listed as potential consequences as running a fan constantly in the night. And I want to go back to the 1927 article because they mention a few things: nausea, facial paralysis, and asphyxiation. But over the many decades of this idea, there have been many other conditions that are commonly referenced. In fact, some even more than those. I would say several have become a lot more prominent, a lot more commonly attributed to fan death than certainly like facial paralysis or nausea. So first up, we have hyperthermia. So hyper, not hypo, also known as heat stress. So the reasoning behind the idea of hyperthermia is the idea that, of course, a fan causes air movement, and normally if you're sweating a little bit or what have you, this would help increase, I think, convection, but basically the idea of sweat evaporation, which would for you feel cooling, and so it should actually cool your body. However, in high heat and high humidity environments, sweat evaporation is not able to sufficiently cool the body. Now, I don't know what the summers look like in South Korea, but in a similar area not too far away, like the Philippines, Fredo, you would know,
Mm-hmm.
during the summer, very hot, very humid, sweat evaporation becomes almost impossible because of how supersaturated the air is with moisture. And so in that environment, sweat actually can't evaporate, and it makes you feel even hotter because it is essentially trapping heat against the skin. And so as a result, the idea here is that this fan is circulating this hot air while you can't evaporate your sweat. And so it almost exacerbates the idea or creates a more susceptible environment to heat stress, which could then lead to an expedited onset of heat exhaustion or other heat-related conditions.
Oh, interesting. Because you think it
Yeah.
would like help like facilitate just like the pushing away or the offloading of heat from your pores and your skin.
Yeah, I guess if your sweat can't evaporate, right?
Mhm.
If you're in that humid of an environment, it's kind of counterintuitive. Like the air movement would still feel like it should help. But honestly, I don't know what you do without getting like some sort of external source of removing the sweat or some sort of external source of cooling, like
Right.
ice or something cooler than you. In fact, in 2011, the American Environmental Protection Agency discouraged people from using fans in rooms with no ventilation when the heat index was above 89.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. I don't know enough, or don't remember enough about thermodynamics to really go for this one. But again, I think the main issue there is the hot and humid environment and the inability of sweat to evaporate. It does seem that a fan could exacerbate this situation.
Interesting. It's just
Yeah.
you just bring like aerodynamics into it and everything, you know. And it's just like you get to that sciencey part where I go, I don't know. Yeah.
Right. I trust
People
the
with
expert.
Bigger brains
Right.
than me.
Yeah.
Experts, get on this.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the science, break it down, because I think things work one way, but it's all chain reactions off of other things and having to know the body and aerodynamics, and then there's just like it all compounds into just so many things that I'm not qualified for.
Yeah, right? And I think the thing here, too, that really stands out to me is the no ventilation. I think to really have no ventilation in a modern home, you'd have to like line the walls with some sort of plastic material and almost create a vacuum sealed space.
Mhm.
Because many rooms do have like, you can't perfectly seal off a room. But I'm sure it's mentioning more no ventilation as far as like external air being able to be circulated through actively. but a lot of rooms, even bedrooms, will have vents that vent out into the hallway to keep all the air in the house kind of part of one ecosystem. But yeah, so that's hyperthermia. What's interesting is that it could also help exacerbate, it is said, the idea of hypothermia, which is the opposite. It's caused by abnormally low body temperatures and inadequate thermoregulation. As the name suggests, thermoregulation is when the body is able to kind of keep control of the body's temperature within a healthy boundary. You know, when it gets hot, you sweat, you have increased blood flow to the skin, things of that nature. When it's cold, you almost have the exact opposite. Your muscles start to shiver so as to create some sort of warmth within them. You have vasoconstriction, so all the blood leaves your skin area so the heat doesn't leave your body. And in, I imagine, increasingly cold temperatures, blood leaves your limbs to go to your core body to keep your vital organs more warm. But those are all natural ways your body kind of works. Metabolism is also in play. In general, though, when you go to sleep, your metabolism naturally slows down, and this makes the body a little bit more sensitive to temperature, and by consequence, the idea of hypothermia. Because again, we're talking about a fan at night. Now, the logic here is that with a fan blowing cool air on you at night, it would cause your temperature to drop significantly enough to then cause hypothermia. Those more at risk were elderly people, someone with frail health, for example, who might have a lot more of a struggle to keep their body temperature regulated and to keep the body warm. In fact, there's been some autopsies of people who were believed to have died by fan death who actually ended up having other health issues like heart problems or even alcoholism that themselves may have worsened the idea of a temperature drop, allowing them to be ill a little bit more easily. And so it's almost like, yeah, there were other surrounding circumstances that actually exacerbated this issue, not necessarily the fan. The fan might have just been kind of associated with it rather than causing it, right? I don't know enough to really say like for certain, but I've never had a fan work so well that I felt frigid, like that cold, but I guess it depends on the environment. And again, we're talking about a non-ventilated room, a sealed room where the fan is blowing directly on you, you know?
I don't know. For me, it's usually too efficient, or the fan is just like drying me out, like my eyes or my lips or whatnot. And then that's why I usually don't turn it on and just bump the AC, which isn't, you know, as energy efficient. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just never felt like turning on a fan has ever made anything worse to a huge detriment, aside from just like, oh, my eyes are getting dried out because the air is going right into my face. I will say, like, even with like, I guess I can kind of see a little bit of it because I do think I was starting to get like sinus infections, I think at the old place that I was at, because my bed and where I laid my head was positioned exactly where the AC vent would just start kicking like right into my face. And so the filter wasn't very clean. Not that it would never get dirty, but if it just wasn't like super, I would have to change it out instead of every 3 months, maybe like every month, just because of the fact that like I just felt like I was getting sinus infections all the time because the air was just kicking in my face.
Yeah.
So I can see how there's concerns about particles being just tossed in your way constantly, now that I'm thinking about it. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess a fan could do that.
Yeah. It's, again, this is all personal anecdote. And again, I'm not, you know, I'm not the stamp of scientific approval here. It's interesting. I think it's really interesting that, you know, this is very testable and really hasn't been tested. We'll talk about one study towards the end here that was done, but even that has great flaws within it. And so like, I'm very intrigued. All right. It's like, is it passing the gut check? And why haven't we really like analyzed it? Is it because it's not like worth the scientific community to approach this and analyze it and kind of debunk or bunk it? You know, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely been dried out by a fan going before. Personally, I've never really hit the stage of like risking hyper or hypothermia. So it's hard for my brain to wrap around it, but I can understand how it might be a piece to a greater puzzle of somebody who is a little bit more frail, somebody who has other underlying health conditions. And so it all gets wrapped up and attributed to the fan, where maybe the fan was just a small piece to an otherwise susceptible person.
It's very true.
Yeah. But this next one, I definitely have a little bit more of an opinion on, I will say. Again, flexing my decent knowledge of science, but not like, again, I'm not some sort of like quote that guy on things, but I'm just a guy that likes to learn. But asphyxiation, this is where I was very curious, right? The idea, like, listen, as a kid, yes, did I notice that if I stuck my head out of a moving vehicle, it suddenly becomes very hard to breathe because that air is moving so fast and there's a negative pressure effect. And so like, you feel like you're starting to struggle a little bit? Sure. So does that translate to a fan? Maybe. But I was very interested to see that fan death was highly correlated with the idea of asphyxiation to the point where some of these warnings talk about that, talk about suffocation. So to expand on this, many people believe that fans cause oxygen displacement and carbon dioxide intoxication, which would then lead to asphyxiation, right? Not getting enough oxygen to the body to the point where you essentially suffocate, pass out, and then die. Now, when we breathe, this is why I want to break it down a little bit scientifically, because colloquially, right, as a kid, I'm thinking you breathe in oxygen, you breathe out CO2, but it's not so direct. Because when we inhale, you're inhaling, if it's fresh air, right, something like 78% nitrogen. The next chunk is oxygen, like about 21%, and almost zero, but never fully 0% carbon dioxide, especially if you're breathing in a bag, hyperventilating, breathing your own air a little bit. Now, when you exhale, it isn't that 21% oxygen just goes away. You actually still breathe out quite a bit of oxygen. Otherwise, if you hyperventilated, you'd pass out very quickly. So when you breathe out, the nitrogen comes out. You don't really do anything with that, 78% nitrogen. You breathe out about 16% oxygen and now about 4% CO2. You can kind of breathe your own air for quite some time. I did very, very rough math. And I said, all right, you take a very common or even small bedroom, a 10 by 10, which is kind of the room I'm sitting in right now. Let's say it's about an 8-foot ceiling, so 800 cubic feet of a bedroom. And for a human breath, if you're in a perfectly vacuum sealed room, breathing at a normal rate with a normal like lung capacity, it would take you roughly 72 hours, I think is what my rough calculation was, to die from oxygen deprivation in such a small environment. And so the idea that the fan is somehow quickening this when it's really just moving air around the space, if anything, it's making it more homogeneous. I think the fear is predicated on a flawed idea that you're breathing out more CO2 than you are. And so it is then quickly polluting all of the air, and that you can't breathe any CO2 without detrimental effects is kind of, I think, the assumption of the fear. But in reality, you can actually breathe a decent amount of CO2 before you get to a point of lightheadedness, passing out, or passing away.
Yeah, it might just be like the simplified understanding of like, you breathe in oxygen, you breathe out CO2, and you're just creating more CO2, and then from there you like suffocate, etc. Yeah, when the science behind it is actually such a low percentage.
And that is kind of the idea, according to this theory. In, once again, an unventilated room, because if it was ventilated, it would introduce some fresh air. The fans would recycle the CO2 that you're breathing out right back to you, maybe quicker than otherwise, and therefore you breathe that in, and suddenly any presence of CO2 then is starting to poison or suffocate you. Which, yeah, I mean, you're not trying to breathe CO2, but you can breathe a little bit of it. Your body isn't 100% efficient at converting it. So I'm kind of giving my opinion, backing it with a little bit of my understanding. I'm very curious if anybody has some other understanding there, but because again, it is a fear that has been very prominent and very interesting. But now let's talk about the next one. The next two even are kind of interesting. So you talked about dehydration. The eyes drying out is certainly something I've experienced, like with ceiling fans. So I try to sleep without moving air personally. But I also, in freshman year of college, didn't have AC, and so I was very acquainted with a box fan just blowing into the room. I guess that was with an open window, but anyway. So regarding this particular medical condition, Larry Kalkstein of the University of Miami has commented on the theory, stating that if you're already dehydrated, sitting in front of a fan in a hot room will make you, obviously, more dehydrated, primarily because in a hot room, you're going to be sweating. And if it's blowing more hot air on you, it might increase the sweating. That air movement will increase the evaporation. And so therefore you kind of have this added effect of water leaving your body. So there is some credence there. However, he does not believe in fan death and has come out against the aforementioned theories, stating that, there really isn't anything to worry about here. There's some support for odds and ends, but not enough for it to be lethal, I think is the general conclusion here. Yes, it could make dehydration or, play with your body temperature, but unless there's something else going on to make it lethal, you don't have anything to worry about.
Yeah, it very much seems like it's a very specific, rare situation in case, not something that's common. I'm sure like when those fans hit the market, everyone was having, everyone had them. And maybe one case was reported? That could have been like a very unique situation, not just some widespread epidemic or something like that.
Well, once we talk about the facial paralysis, we'll kind of get into the warnings and some of the deaths attributed to it, because surprisingly, even in modern times, I'll just give it to you now, it is said that 7 to 10 people die per year by fan death. And I'm very curious to talk more about that. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So you would think that, maybe it's rare and maybe it was a false attribution, but why then is the Korean Consumer Protection Board, a state-funded agency, saying that it's actually 7 to 10? We'll talk about that. But it's more than you'd think, right?
Yeah, that's way more than I thought.
Yeah.
I wonder if we know the environment that they were in, and if we know the medical condition that they were in too as well. I feel like that might be oversimplifying it. You know what I mean? Where it's just fan death 7 to 10 a year, but there's these people had these medical conditions and this was happening and stuff like that. It's not just cut and dry.
Maybe some missing nuance. Maybe this is the government propaganda keeping on and saving face and just keep the myth alive. It's not enough to be alarmed, but it's enough to believe. We'll talk about that.
To what? For what gain?
Right. Especially since the 1970s energy crisis is no more. Not really. There's always a crisis somewhere, but
there's always a crisis.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that. But first, I'm very curious on the thoughts of facial paralysis. There's not a lot to discuss here. It is one of the first things out the gate that the news articles were talking about in 1927. And so I was like, wow, I'm very, very interested to see how these things could relate. And based on something that you said earlier, there might be a small correlation. I could see it being possible, but hard to believe, right? So, okay. It's a commonly believed myth that cold air can trigger what's called Bell's palsy, which is thought to be where this belief originated. So Bell's palsy, talk about that for a second. It's a temporary paralysis of the facial nerve, and it's usually on half the face, in which case you lose control of the muscles. You might see the face droop a little bit. I've seen people who have had this, and it takes many months for them to kind of heal from this, but it could be caused by many things. In my experience, a lot of the people in my life have had it because of high levels of stress, but it can also be caused by viral infections, bacterial infections, trauma, diabetes, pregnancy, and several other things. The body is a complicated thing. Now, however, it has been proven that there's no direct link between Bell's palsy and cold air or electric fans, and so that's probably why in modern times you don't see so much of the facial paralysis element of this discussion. But I was very interested at the beginning why that might be in play. And so it does feel like the beginning of all of this is several old wives' tales or kind of old pieces of knowledge that kind of correlated and became a perfect storm for a new age version of these things. They all came together to create a new kind of belief that has stood the test of time until now, in which case I would say it's starting to fall off with the younger generations of South Korea, but we'll talk about that in a bit as well. But yeah, so I don't know. Viral infections, bacterial infections, if you're in an environment where there's a lot of dust and some of that gets blown up into you, I don't know. I don't know enough about how some of those infections might work. I figured they're infections of the brain, not so much the sinuses, but...
That's what I would think, right?
Yeah.
Probably enters through the sinus and then gets into the brain, like an infection that spreads into the brain type of situation.
Right.
But still, it seems very situational, very rare.
Again, it's been proven otherwise, but... I will say, though, there is a spooky thin layer between the sinuses and the brain. There's almost like a spongy-esque type of membrane, or forget what it's called, but it's way back in there. So there is some sort of sinus brain, I don't know, membrane, or...
some type of easy connection there.
Kind of, yeah. And I heard a story, man, this was a while ago. It might have been on Ripley's Believe It or Not or whatever, where this guy... I guess had a terrible sinus infection, and every day for the rest of his life, his nose would be runny. And it turned out that sinus infection had damaged that whatever, that medium, that material. And his sinuses were leaking brain fluid for decades.
What?
Yeah. That was like a real thing.
And that doesn't like kill you immediately?
I guess it was small enough. I don't know enough about how some of that stuff works, but it doesn't seem great.
No, that can't be good at all. But it also
No.
just like, man, it's like, that's one of those things where like it might not cause an immediate issue, but you might just have like an ongoing annoyance over the course of like a decade. And then you finally find out it's like, oh, it's because of this one thing. And it's like, oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Like, if I only knew sooner, I could like help get rid of it. You know what I mean?
Right. But I will say, if your nose is running for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, go to the doc. If it's running
Yeah.
for a decade, go to the ER, man.
Yeah, people
something.
be waiting way too long for this stuff, man. Like, just
I
go
get
get
it.
it done and taken care of. Like,
The repercussions could be more damaging than the initial issue. But I
Yes.
get it. You know, the bills of it all. Poof.
the bills that's so annoying, and I get it. Like, no one likes to go, and that's the thing with like, you know, like with dentistry, people don't like going to the dentist.
Right.
And they put that off even more than a doctor. A doctor's like, oh, my body, my health. With like dental issues, the pain happens and then it goes away, and you just go, it's gone. I'll get to it when I get to it. When really what's happening is now the infection is burrowing its way to your nerves, and then it becomes a root canal, and then it's even worse.
Yeah. And you would know this.
Yeah.
You studied this.
Yeah, I studied this. It was almost my career path.
Yeah, man. I'll say it now. Floss. Get a water pick. Dental hygiene is increasingly understood as the origin to so many other health problems,
Yes.
and it's in your hands, Task Force.
Yes, it is. Honestly, just spend the money on an electric toothbrush. It helps get rid of a lot of initial problems that fester. An electric toothbrush, and then you just take your time.
Yeah.
Just go across. So many people just go, "Urgh." It's like, no. You actually just kind of just sit on each tooth. It's a very slow process. It's a very like chill process.
Yeah.
The electric toothbrush goes a super long way, and the water pick is like, you're primo with the water pick. Yeah, flossing is huge though. You gotta floss. I know it sucks. It's annoying, people. I know, but how many times have you flossed and you go, oh my god, look at all that food that came out? Yeah.
Dude, you smell it one time and you go, never. That's been in there just forever. So for a day or two? No, I gotta start flossing. My wife's very good about it. And so we kind of keep each other, like, when my bad habits start to show, I'm like, well, she's flossing, so I'll do it.
Yeah, I just water pick it. I'd put it in the shower and then just, fill up the water, and then I just go, and like, cool, done. You know, so easy. It takes like a minute.
Someone's doing it right now. I can hear it. Those things
Yeah.
is loud. I want a silent water pick. Oh man. Just get me a silent water pick. Task Force, if you know there's one out there, just send it my way. It's so loud.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're pretty loud.
We're way off track. It was one of those fun ones. Okay, let's talk now about the deaths and the warnings, starting with the latter. So in 2006, like I said, the Korean Consumer Protection Board, which was a state-funded agency, they listed, quote, asphyxiation from electric fans and air conditioners, end quote, so both air movement devices, as one of the top 5 accidents that reoccur in the summer. And I want to quote them. So this is what they warned. If bodies are exposed to electric fans or air conditioners for too long, it causes bodies to lose water and hypothermia. If directly in contact with a fan, this could lead to death from increased carbon dioxide saturation concentration and decrease of oxygen concentration. The risks are higher for the elderly and patients with respiratory problems. End quote. I do appreciate that they qualified with it, because that does make sense. If you have especially exacerbated underlying medical conditions, it is worth saying something, right?
Yeah, like that is of note. You know what I mean? It does make a huge difference.
Now here's where it starts to get a little bit more shocking, as you kind of indicated. So according to the board, there were around 20 cases of fan asphyxiation between 2003 and 2005. They advised that to prevent injury, again, I'll quote them, timers should be set, wind direction should be rotated, and doors should be left open. So basically, keeping yourself from a tightly closed room, at least opening your room up to the greater airfill of the full house, And according to other reports, the agency has also estimated that over the years, beyond just 2003 and 5, it's been estimated that about 7 to 10 people die per year by fan death. They've also stated that, quote, when the steamy heat of summer arrives, dying from suffocation or hypothermia happens every year because of fans, end quote. I am desperate for them to study this. I'm such a fan of the scientific method that, like, you've piqued my interest. You really have me thinking, like, well, I don't want to mess with it because death, when it's on the table, of course nothing's worth rolling the dice there, you know? But at the same time...
but I mean, also, again, I revert to you drive a car. It's probably like one of the highest risks of death that you take every single day. You know what I mean?
That's very true.
And it's just like, I don't know. At what point is it? I don't know. It's rough. It's rough because you don't want to take too many risks, but then there's some necessities, and so is a necessity. I don't know. Like, existing in this world is a risk, right? And so it's really just, what are you willing to risk? When are you willing to risk?
Yeah, absolutely.
Am I not going to fly ever again and go travel and explore the world? And at some point, you kind of just have to live your life.
Right. So, I mean, that's a great example. Driving a car, way more dangerous than flying. But there's a lot of people that subscribe to, like, well, this could be deathly, so therefore I won't do this. And I go, well, there's a lot of other things that you don't apply the same logic to. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about that study that I teased earlier in 2008. A professor at the, here it is, Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering at Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology named Cheun Rim. They decided to conduct a study to test the legitimacy of this theory. And I'm here for it.
I love it.
I love it.
Give
Let's
it a
get
test.
the tangible.
Get the scientists behind it, and let them test it out.
Right. Get all those buff brains in there. However, it was in Korea, and therefore they couldn't find anyone to participate in the study. I understand. That kind of makes sense. And so instead, he used a sample size of 1, his 11-year-old daughter. Every 5 minutes, he would check her body temperature, her blood pressure, and her hand temperature. And over the course of this study, her vitals barely changed. So this study did get some attention when it was released, but it didn't change the general opinion of the public. And I also have to say, it's flawed. I don't know if he came into it with a specific idea in mind, because obviously, if you're trying to prove your theory, it inherently gets in the way of a proper and unbiased scientific method. But also, we have a sample size of 1. This isn't a big enough pool to really...
Yeah, it's not the most, like, robust experiment, to be honest. No, it's hard to simulate. You know, you want to have a ton of people. And then even then, probably like a ton of different factors and different conditions, maybe some people with respiratory conditions, stuff like that. You know what I mean? To really get into it and really test it out, to be able to have some inkling of proof.
Yeah.
Interesting, though, to test it on your 11-year-old daughter.
I mean, I think that shows a level of confidence in the hypothesis.
That's true.
Which is that it is not anything. But I'm really curious why, and maybe somebody has and we just missed it, but there are a few notable deaths that have been attributed to fan death. We're going to talk about those here in a second. Why somebody hasn't gone through and looked at these more closely to see, to your point, is there anything else missing that is otherwise just being washed out when we say, it's just fan death, right? So let's talk about those. In the summer months, mainstream South Korean news sources regularly report alleged cases of fan death. Let's talk about a few specific. We'll kind of move through time here. Starting with an article from July 28th, 1997 from the Korean Herald, they reported that after a heat wave, right, which is already pretty dangerous, no matter where you live, it can be very dangerous, a heat wave made its way through Korea, and at least 10 people died, as they wrote, via fan death. The article detailed that electric fans can remove oxygen from the air and can lower body temperatures dramatically. We've also talked about them raising body temperatures when it's hot, humid, and sweat can't evaporate. But that's what the article says. Removes the oxygen, lowers the body temperature. They don't really go any further. They don't explain any further. They don't get any more detailed on those 10 individuals. So, grain of salt.
Yeah, because what are the conditions that they're having?
I believe it was this article, but specifically they said that a 16-year-old girl died from suffocation after she fell asleep with her fan on. So you would assume, right? We don't know any of the other possible conditions she has, but young, likely healthy, but we don't know that. But that's as great of a detail as we get on some of these cases in the article.
Yeah, it's just like, Man, are people sleeping in just like super airtight rooms?
I mean, it really could be.
Like the most like concealed rooms, and you're just circling the same dead air? Like, what is happening here?
Right. I mean, who's to say it isn't already a room that is not fit for the conditions that the weather's already bringing, right?
Right.
Is sun baking into this room? Is there any airflow whatsoever, regardless of the fan? Is the heat being brought up? Because oftentimes during a heat wave, if you don't have any of the windows open, it can get hotter inside than outside. So again, without the details, it's really hard to go deeper, either for or against.
There's so many different contributing factors that could take place here, and there's millions and billions of people. And so, yeah, you're going to have these unique situations.
Moving on now to about 13, 14 years later, again in the summer, on July 4th, specifically in 2011, the same newspaper reported that a 59-year-old man had died after sleeping with an electric fan pointed directly at him. Again, that's another thing that is warned, pointed away. But while the article noted that there was no evidence that the fan had caused the death, many people believed the opposite, right? So they report that he died while a fan was directly pointed at him, but they said that there's no evidence that it was the fan that did it. So it's kind of like, why did you put it that way then? Because you know a lot of people subscribe to this idea.
Yeah. At that point, are we just going for shock factor?
That's a great point. It could be.
Yeah.
Now, we mentioned earlier about, being of advanced age, being a little bit more frail, or even having had a lot of alcohol can exacerbate underlying conditions that the fan might be a part of. And that's kind of at play here in 2013. A daily newspaper in the city of Ulsan reported that a 58-year-old man died after falling asleep while heavily intoxicated, also with a fan blowing on him. Later that month, then, Seoul's local newspaper explained that electric fans cause bodily temperatures to drop dangerously low, especially after drinking alcohol. And despite these reports, there's no scientific basis to fan death or these claims. So again, it kind of becomes this nebulous area where I even struggle to have a very firm opinion because I don't know enough, and I don't want to insult any or offend anybody. But what we can analyze is like, okay, well, these parts don't make sense.
Yeah, there's just not enough there. And there's also not enough information being given with these deaths and these situations.
Right.
It's just so vague. It's just fan death. Okay. Were they healthy individuals?
That's a great question.
It's not enough.
100%. Because, and we even outlined it here just in my notes below that, because many of these cases don't show if the victims of these deaths were suffering from any other conditions. What's the background of these individuals? Were there pre-existing medical conditions? We know one had been heavily drinking alcohol that night, but otherwise, was the 16-year-old healthy? Was something else happening? Both of them are in their late 50s in the other two articles. I don't know. So ultimately, to end the kind of conversation in kind of a broad closing here, beyond our colloquial analysis of things, ultimately, there's no scientific evidence that proves leaving a fan on at night can cause hypothermia, hyperthermia, asphyxiation, or dehydration to the point of death is the big caveat, to the point of death.
Right.
And while fan death is a myth that has persisted in Korean culture for decades, new information and the kind of conversation we're having here has led younger Koreans to be a little bit more skeptical of fan death as a dangerous phenomenon. To the point where, as I kind of hinted at the beginning, we may be, it's like an interesting time for mystery lovers, we may be seeing the slow end of a societal superstition. Over the years, again, we've talked about some of the beginnings of a ghost story. We've talked about how murders can then lead into the paranormal. We've seen how stories caught the zeitgeist by storm, get widely reported, and then cement themselves in the historical annals. But here, we're kind of seeing the opposite. And I put this here, I was like, what started as, I don't believe it, but why risk it? Because my life is on the line, has now become kind of, I don't believe it, and there really isn't any risk at all. And therefore, I really don't believe it. That's kind of where it's going.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be something that fades away with the generations. You know what I mean? Because it's like, It's so minute and so vague. Not to downplay deaths, but to categorize it with fans when so many people use it all across the world. And then even then, if it was to be like a fan can cause a death, 7 to 10 people every year, I don't know. I'm still taking that risk for the comfort. I'll ventilate I'll leave the doors open in my room, etc. Like I just don't feel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what is it? Like 0.00001% that you're that person? Like, what other things am I risking every day that could potentially cause greater harm to me?
Well, like the warnings say, you open the door and it seems to mitigate the issue whatsoever. So
Right. So I just do that.
I don't know. Yeah, it's very interesting. I love, we've talked throughout the years of this show, talked about folklore, urban legends, and sometimes like things like this, societal beliefs, and try to analyze the origin of them, because even then it's a mystery of its own. Like, is it real? Is it not? What even caused it to show up in the first place? And in this case, what is kind of causing it to wind down? I just love the discussion of all of this. Even if you want to just come out the gate and be like, that's fake. The first sentence of this podcast could have been like, it's an unsubstantiated urban legend, period, end of sentence. And it mostly is. But it's the discussion, the dissection of it that I find so fascinating.
Right.
So Task Force, if you like this kind of a little bit more peculiar one here for the holiday times, let us know if there's anything else of this kind that you would love us to kind of explore, because I think that this is maybe one step further beyond folklore and some of like things like the Pukwudgie or the yokai, where it's like creatures, they're not necessarily cryptids, but they're folklore in the form of creatures. This feels like a step or two beyond that. So I'm very curious what other cracks and crevices of society like this we can explore. But as we come to an end, Fredo, I'm very curious, do you have any closing thoughts before we thank some of the specific task force members?
I just feel like there's a laundry list of things that, maybe 10 people would pass away from, and this might just be one of them. But I feel like it's just going to fade away as the generations go on. I feel like it was such a small concern and not enough effort was put into it to properly research. And even then, it's like, why would you if it's such a small number? And I think just back then, people were just like, it might have just been the government energy crisis where it's like, yo, turn them off.
Right.
Don't keep them on.
It just amped it up even further.
Yeah.
Because without that, would it really have had a second wind and really solidified,
Mm-hmm.
Well, like when I was in elementary school, step on a crack, you break your mama's back. If the government started amping that up, I might actually start watching my step, Not that, you show one case where that kind of happened to be correlated and not the 19 billion other cases where it didn't happen.
Exactly.
It can play with you.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for another very interesting conversation and supporting our show. If you want to support us in a couple of different ways, you can do that at redwebpod.com. You can review us wherever you listen to podcasts, because each and every week here on Monday, we're breaking down another topic for you. And we love the discussions that we see over on our Discord channel. If you have any theories or other ideas, a lot of these topics and episodes come to us from you guys. We have our Patreon page, which is how you can get to Discord. There's just a lot of things you could do. And you could also share it with other family members. Now that you're traveling for the season, maybe Aunt Gertrude needs to be distracted, okay? She's coming out with her own conspiracies. Let's pump her full of the good stuff.
Exactly.
Red Web.
Get her off your back. And on this podcast, we'll deal with her in the comment section, okay?
Bring out
That's
the moms.
fine. Yeah, bring out the moms. Moms love us. They love Red Web.
We're mom's favorite podcast. I can't tell you, Fredo, how many friends of ours, moms, listen to our show.
Really?
Yes. We're big on moms.
Hi, Mom.
I know my mom's listening, so hello, Mom. But with that, as we come to an end, I want to give a few shout outs to some specific task force members this week. We have Jess, who is our newest Patreon member at the Buff Scientist tier. Thank you very much. We have Elijah Fiore, also a buff scientist, and this week's squonks are, in no particular order, Jordan Chase, Neo Trickster, Dakota, and Michael Fitzgerald. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate you for supporting us directly at redwebpod.com. And with that said, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.